Let's go to the main menu and click Docs. The document window has opened. Therefore, go to the top right and click on the blue button labeled New. Choose from the menu Sermon. A sermon document has opened up in your layout. Next, right-click on the tab labeled Untitled Sermon. Choose the first menu option open in a floating window. The sermon document window should be maximized and take up the full screen. If not, maximize the window at the top right for PC users or maximize at the top left for Mac users. Now, let's work through this interface. At the top left, you'll see the 3 horizontal bars. I call this the hamburger menu. Go ahead and click it once. The outline view has appeared at the left. Keep in mind this will only show you headings 1 through 5. Now in the center is where you're going to type all your sermon content. Notice the title is provided and then a gray heading 1. Let's go ahead and click on the gray heading 1 as seen here. Please type Introduction. Please notice at the left in the outline view we now see Introduction because this text has been formatted as heading 1. Great job. Now let's go back to the top menu. Notice that Edit is selected, and that's what we've been doing, editing the sermon document. Now let's click on Text and examine the text view. The text view essentially is what the sermon would look like if you were to print it out or publish it. At this point, we simply have the title, Untitled Sermon, the author, and our first heading, Introduction. Let's click on Slides to see the slide view. At this point, we only have one slide, and that's the introduction. This is real handy before you export to PowerPoint to see that you have all the slides properly created and formatted. Let's click the next menu option labeled Handout located here. In the Handout view, Logos will display all your content plus any items you formatted as a handout. We'll show you how to do this later in the video. Let's click on the last menu option, Question. In the Question view, you'll see all the text of your sermon and any items you have formatted as a question. Now let's go over to the far right menu and click on the Share button, as seen here. The Share menu has opened up. Notice at the top there's 2 options, Public and Group. Public will allow you to share your sermon document with all Logos users. In order to share this sermon document with all Logos users, you need to click on the option labeled No, Make Document Public. This is a toggle switch. It'll turn to yes and then provide you with a web link that you can share with others, and then it will additionally place your sermon document in the public document folder. So be careful that you're only sharing this when you truly want to share it. The group option allows you to share your sermon document with specific Faith Life user groups. Let's go ahead and click on Group as seen here. The group option has a drop-down To menu. In that To menu will be a list of all the Faith Life groups that you're connected to. If you have not joined LearnLogos.com, then you will not see any groups listed. I do recommend joining LearnLogos.com and starting your own group or joining another. Please click on the drop-down To, as seen here. Here is a list of some of the Faith Life groups that I'm connected with. Notice you can click in the Find Groups box to search for your group if you have too many in the list. And also, you can click more than one group to share with at one time by clicking in the circles. Let's go ahead and click the X to close this window. Now, one of the new features in Logos 9 that I'm excited about is this next option labeled Preach. So, go to the top right and click on this button labeled Preach. This is the Preach view. You do need to be connected to the internet in order to use this feature. Now, in the Preach view, notice at the top left you have your current time. Below, you have your sermon content. Then, over at the right, we have some additional options. The first one is the timer. That's right, you can set the time that you're allotted to speak and preach, and this will be a countdown timer. Let's go ahead and click on 30 min, as seen here. The clock menu has opened. At the top, you can enter in the number of minutes for your preaching and teaching. Then you can set the flash options. The first one, it's a 1 and 2 minute warning, and then the second one is flashing when it's done. Let's go ahead and click on the green button labeled Start Timer. The countdown timer has begun. To close the timer menu, please click 30 min or whatever time you set, as seen here. Just to the right of the clock menu is the slide view. Go ahead and click this icon. In this view, Logos will display a thumbnail of your slide. Personally, I have found this to be more of a distraction than a help, so I prefer not to use the slide view. Let's go to the last icon at the right, the big A and small a, and click it. As you can see, Logos gives you quite a few viewing options. Text column can be paging versus scrolling. Personally, I prefer paging. This way, I can't accidentally scroll and get lost in my document. Instead, in the page view, I have arrows I can click on and turn a page like I would manually. There is a font type option, font size, line spacing, margins, and if you have access to Proclaim, you can control the Proclaim presentation. These are all very helpful to make sure that you can view your sermon in an optimum way. Let's go ahead and click the big A, small a to close this menu. By the way, if you choose paging for text scrolling, at the bottom right, you will see two buttons, a forward button and a previous button. It also tells you the page that you're on. This is the easiest way to control the content that you will see and read when using the preaching tool. Let's close our preaching window by clicking on the X at the top right for PC or at the top left for the Mac. Once you complete your sermon, Logos does give you the option to publish your full sermon into the Logos database so that all users can find and read your sermon. So therefore, go ahead and click on the Publish button located here at the top right. Logos provides 4 export options. Send to Faith Life Proclaim, it's a church presentation software. You can post to Faith Life Sermons, and that's a website for online sermon hosting, and that's free of charge. You can export to PowerPoint, which will be your slides, and you can do print export. This one has the most flexible options. Therefore, click Print Export. The Print Export window has opened. Notice the preview window in the center of the screen, and then over at the bottom right are the various export formats. I'm going to use the vertical scroll bar at the right to scroll down to see the remaining options. Now, depending if you're on a PC or Mac, the Send to New Documents may be different, but notice you can export your full text to Microsoft Word or Pages. Once you've done exporting, go ahead and close this window by clicking on the X at the top right as seen here. Let's go ahead and click Edit at the top left as seen here. Now at this point, our sermon document is pretty basic. We have a title and an introduction with a heading 1 format. I'm going to click on Introduction as seen here. Let's change the formatting for this text. Therefore, go to the top left and click on this drop-down menu located here. These are the various formats that you can apply to the text. Normal is straightforward text. Headings 1 through 5 will change the text from very large to much smaller, but still larger than normal size. Now, block quote, illustrations, and prompts allow you to format the text to help you visualize the type of text you're reading. And this can be real handy when you're trying to quote, illustrate, or even make sure that you want to state something, and that's what the prompting will do. Let's choose heading 2. Notice the word introduction has been reduced in size. Now, it is important to use headings because this can help you create not only an outline, but visually you can see what the main point is and the supporting points as well. So be very thoughtful when you organize your sermon to make sure you have a clear structure or outline for the text you're going to preach. Now let's go back to the top left and click on the Heading 2 button as seen here. Let's choose from the menu Block Quote. Notice the text is smaller and there's a small vertical gray bar appearing before the text. Again, this is a visual icon to let you know you're introducing quoted material. Let's once again click on the drop-down menu located here labeled Block Quote. Go ahead and choose Illustration from the menu. Notice the text size remains the same, but now we see a green vertical line to let us know visually this content is an illustration. Let's once again click the drop-down menu located here labeled Illustration. Now to save some time, I've already chosen Prompt. Notice how the text is turned red and there's a greater sign placed before it. This is a helpful visual to remind you this is important to say. Now I'm going to choose Normal from the drop-down menu now. When Normal is selected, all formatting is removed and what we have is plain text. And this again is to help you differentiate between your outlines, your block quotes, your illustrations, and your important prompt statements. Notice on the toolbar, there's some additional options. We have font size, big A, little a, bold, italic, underline, and then there's the fill in button. Now, to use this option, you must first click below in the sermon text area. Then we'll click on the fill in button. Therefore, click at the end of the word introduction and then press enter. Now, if you're on a new line in the sermon text editor, you should see a flashing cursor. So let's go ahead and click in the fill in button as seen here. After you click the fill in button, begin typing in the text below. Notice that as we type fill in the blank example, it is all underlined. Now be sure to press enter so that we can go to the next line of text. So this visually tells you that this is a fill in the blank example. Let's go over to the right and click on this icon labeled Include in Handout. Now, wherever your cursor is in the sermon document, when you click the Include in Handout button, that row of text will become blue. So if you didn't press enter, the fill in the blank text would be highlighted in blue. Now, I pressed enter and I typed in the blue text box, Include in Handout Example. Notice it's still underlined. That's because the fill in button was still enabled. So you have to be aware of what is selected and deselected. Whatever is highlighted in blue will appear in the handout, but this will only be seen when we click out the handout option on the menu below. But before we do that, let's click on this next icon, Include in Questions. Notice again, wherever your cursor is, that row will now be highlighted with this green color. Now, in this case, I did press enter. When the green box appeared, I then typed in the green box, Include in Questions Example. My text is still underlined because the fill in button is still enabled. Now let's click at the end of the word introduction located here. Now let's turn off the fill in option by clicking on the fill in button located here. Next, I clicked below at the end of the text in the green box, press enter, and then typed in John 3:16. Notice, because the fill in button is disabled, the new text is not underlined. Now, if you want Logos to insert the actual passage, after you type John 3:16, press enter. If you add a space before or after the passage and then press enter, the Bible passage will not be inserted. So it's very important that you type in John space 3:16 and then press enter right away. Go ahead and press enter to insert the biblical text. Whatever is your prioritized Bible, that's the text that will be inserted. Notice also that Logos creates a slide at the left. Now, if your passage is very long, more than one slide will appear. So Logos will automatically create as many slides as it needs to display the full passage. Now let's click below the inserted passage. Now this time, let's type in John space 3:16 and hit the space bar. Notice that the Bible passage is not inserted, nor is a slide created. Now, if at some point you want to add the biblical text and a slide, you need to click on this icon, Add Slides from Selected References. Go ahead and click this icon. Now that we've inserted additional text and slides, let's view the various options at the top. Therefore, click on Text at the top left, located here. Notice in our text view what is missing. First, we do not see any slides. And notice at the top, we only see fill in the blank example. We don't see the handout or question text that we had typed in. Let's now click on the Slides menu option located here. Now in the Slides view, it's pretty straightforward. All we see are the slides. Next, let's click on the Handout option located here. As you can see in the Handout section, all the text is removed except the title, the author, and the one item that we selected to appear in Handout. So I want you to understand that you can create one single document that can be outputted for three different purposes. We can have a full text, we can have a handout, and now let's click on the third document type, question, from the menu located here. Notice again, all we see is the text that we flagged as Include in Questions Example. So this is really handy, but it also gives you a chance to preview. So before you print out, you can make sure you have exactly the content that you do and do not want to see. Now, let's go over to the Preach button and click it as seen here. Notice in the preaching view, we see all the information. Let's go ahead and click on the X at the top right to close this window. Once again, click Edit on the menu at the top left located here. Next, click on the word Introduction. Then, at the top left, click on the drop-down menu located here. Let's change our text format from normal to heading 1. Therefore, click heading 1. Notice that introduction text has increased in size, a slide has appeared, and over at the left, we can see our outline view now includes introduction. Now there's one icon we haven't clicked on yet, and that's at the far right. It's the little eye inside the circle. Go ahead and click the information button. This window allows you to enter data about your sermon. But one feature that's very important is this one. It's the auto-publish to Faith Life Sermons. Make sure that is unchecked. Otherwise, you will be publishing your sermons directly to Faith Life Sermons. Let's go ahead and check this box. Now, normally your name appears as well as a published date. Now, I'm going to click on my name, John Fallahy. Now, because I'm an administrator of several Faith Life groups, I will have a larger list. So I can publish with these various aliases. If you are not an administrator of a Faith Life group, then you will only see your name. I'm going to click on the date 12/6/2020. A calendar has appeared, and now you can choose the date when this sermon will actually appear in Faith Life Sermons. Let's click on this box just to the left labeled Topic. The Topics box allows you to associate various topics with your sermon so that when you're searching or running various guides, your sermon may appear in those search results. Go ahead and type in faith. Notice that a drop-down menu has appeared with the various themes and topics associated with faith. Let's click on the first option, Faith Theme, as seen here. Next, let's click in the box labeled Passages, located here. Go ahead and type John space 3:16 and notice the menu that appears. Let's choose John 3:16 from the menu. Now these three boxes, Series, Topics, and Passages, as well as the additional two boxes, Description and Private Notes, allows you to put in information to tell you more about the sermon. But Logos indexes this information, so it makes it easier to find this sermon as well. Now let's collapse this About section by clicking here on About. Now the next section of this information window is Speaker and Occasion. Notice your name has been placed in there, but we can choose additional details on the occasion, such as date, venue, and service and time. Let's click the calendar icon to add a date for this sermon. I'm going to choose a previous date, November 30th, by clicking on the number 30 for the month of November. Notice the controls. You can change the month and the year. If your date is far away from the current date, it's probably easier simply to type in the month, date, and year manually. Now, most likely, you'll be watching this video at a different date, so just choose today's date. Now, I have already gone into the venue and the service times and entered information. You can see Brookside Baptist Church, 9 a.m. If this is a sermon that you're going to preach more than once in a different venue, then you can click the Add Occasion button, and that makes it possible to enter additional dates, venues, and service times. Let's go ahead next and click in the Audience box located here. At the time this video was made, these are the various audience options that are available. Let's click on General Adult. Below Audience is Liturgy. So if your church follows a liturgical calendar, you can enter that information below. Up at the top, just to the right of the Information button, you can see that there is a notebook icon. This is the Sermon Notebook. Go ahead and click on that icon located here. Now, the Sermon Notebook actually is just a note file, but it is linked to this specific sermon. Now, you may be wondering, what's the benefit of this option? If you like to keep your research, your raw research, and associate it with a finalized sermon, this tool can help you save that information. So let's go ahead and click New Note. A new note window has opened up. Because our Bible was located at Revelation 20 verse 1, an anchor has appeared. Notice also the name of the notebook. It's identical to the name of your sermon. So it's always best to name that sermon first before you create this new sermon note that's associated with your sermon. Now over at the top left, let's click on the hamburger menu. That is these three horizontal lines located here. Now, if you're not in front of your sermon document, you can also search for your sermon notes. To do this, simply click on the notebook icon located here, then click the search magnifying glass icon located here. Next, click in the find box. I've typed in title since that is the first part of my sermon title. Notice Logos has located the sermon title: untitled sermon. I'm going to go ahead and click on that notebook to open it up. Over at the right is the three vertical dots, the stoplight menu. Let's go ahead and click on that option menu. Notice you do have the option to change the name of your notebook file. Now let me warn you, it's always best to make sure the notebook name matches your sermon title. That will just make it easier to keep it organized and find it should you wish to search. Let's go ahead and click rename. You now can change the name of your sermon at the left. Just start typing the new title and then press enter. Now one last point. If you do change the name of your sermon title, then it's wise to change the name of the notebook, and this is how you do it. Let's go ahead and close this window by clicking on the X on the tab located here. Now, one more important feature about the sermon document tool. Now that you've created this notebook, how do you get back to it? Because if you look at the sermon notebook window at the right, you don't see the note. It turns out Logos has automatically created a shortcut to that note. So should your names change and not match, you don't have to worry. The icon at the far right will open up the note file that is associated with this sermon document. That's the purpose of this icon and is a real handy feature. By the way, if the shortcut is grayed out, then you have the confidence to know that there is no notebook associated with the sermon document. So in closing, the question really is, should you use Logos' sermon document to create sermons? And this is a tough question because if you are really comfortable with Word or Pages and all the extra formatting features, then sermon document is not going to be ideal for you. However, you can always take the information from Word when you're all finished and copy and paste it into the sermon document tool, add the additional title and metadata, and now your sermon is fully searchable in the Logos Bible software platform. And that is how I do it. If you're not doing a lot of formatting and you're simply doing some basic text, then creating your sermon from scratch in the sermon document tool is a great approach. Additionally, if you're going to do that, I do recommend having at least two monitors. One monitor for doing the sermon document and the second monitor for doing your research for the sermon. This concludes the sermon document training video.